Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Thank you for tuning in today. Joining us this morning on the phones, Speaker of the Texas House, Dennis Bonnen. Speaker Bonnen, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Obviously, there's a lot going on. The governor's going to have a press conference later on this morning. I guess I want to start off with what President Trump announced yesterday. He and his team, a plan that was developed by Dr. Birx and put his the president put his stamp of approval on it. This phase-in plan to open America up again. What did you think about the plan, and how do you think that plan may apply here in the great state of Texas?
Well, I really appreciate the president and Dr. Birx, and I'm certain Dr. Fauci was involved, putting the time and the attention into creating a plan that gives, I see it as a roadmap to Texas governors and to states on how to reopen their states to business and to get these economies kicked back off, which needs to happen. And so he left great guidelines with great discretion to the states. And that'll have a very positive impact for Texas because, as you know, Governor Abbott has not been afraid to lead during this time of crisis. And it gives our governor, working with Lieutenant Governor Patrick and myself and other leaders, the guidelines and the decision-making to get Texas back to work.
From what you have seen, and I don't want you to, I know you don't want to step on the governor's toes too much here during this interview and what the governor may announce later on, but from what you have seen just with the data for Texas, is Texas one of those states that is going to open up sooner, maybe before May 1st or on May 1st, or do you think Texas is going to have to wait?
Well, I think it depends on what open up means. And if you look at the plan the president and his team laid out, you know, there are multiple phases to that. Do I believe Texas by May 1st could be in one of those phases and opening certain things? Yes. The reality of it is this is a day-to-day based on what the numbers are telling us. The case counts, the death rates, those type things are showing us as to how quickly we can reopen Texas, but we're definitely on the trajectory to have that opportunity. With that said, I think it's of great importance that Texans remember and understand that even in that guidelines that the president laid out, even though some businesses and some sectors may be opened or maybe certain pieces of parts of our state may be open to a degree, that doesn't mean that the other Texans don't need to continue to heed, and frankly, all Texans continue to heed the CDC guidelines. That was a very important piece of the president's guidelines and plan, was that we're going to have to keep heeding these social distancing, washing your hands, and doing those things. And what we have to remember is that if we do not stick to those guidelines in our efforts to get Texas back to work, it quite frankly has a higher probability of not working.
Right.
And so we have got to be respectful. I would argue in the coming weeks and months, we're going to have to show more respect and more consideration for each other than we ever have. We already have done a tremendous job of that, but we're going to have to show constraint and recognition that, you know, maybe that business over there can get back to work, and I'm going to have to continue to restrain myself to make sure that business successfully gets back to serving Texans.
One thing that when I was watching the press conference yesterday, and again, I'm not sure how clear it was. You have these 14 days between phases, right? Where, you know, phase
Correct.
one, if everything's running smooth for, it seems like 14 days, and you can move on to phase two, unless there's a spike.
Correct.
As far as you know, does that mean if we have a spike for, you know, if one day out of those 14s we have a spike, we go back to, we start the counter back over at day one? How does that work in your opinion?
I think that's to the discretion of governors, and that'll be based on expert discussions with medical professionals and scientists as to whether that one day warrants restarting the count or not. I think that's the thing that's so painful for people like myself and most Texans is that this is not something we've ever experienced before. So there are no absolute clear answers to a lot of the questions that are of great importance to us right now. I would like to believe that if there's a one-day spike, of course, it depends on what that spike looks like and what the day before and the day after was. And so I think those are the things that we're going to have to be very reasoned and logical in our approaches to, and listening to experts in what they believe these numbers are indicating to us.
Have we seen are numbers increasing as far as the number of cases right now? Or is that on the increase? Have we seen our peak in Texas? Where are we?
The experts would say we haven't seen the peak, but they are talking about the fact that we have done, and Texans should be proud of this, is that the efforts that we have made have been working and flattening that curve. If you go look, Chad, at the large states in America, California's done well, and people, it's interesting, they've been willing to talk about that in the national media and give Governor Newsom some credit, and absolutely he deserves some. But, there's a state called Texas that's done even better than California. Texas has done better than any large state in the nation at flattening the curve. And so we have done a good job. We obviously still have had more Texans die than we want. We have had more cases than we would desire. But we are doing a better job flattening this curve than any large state in the country. And that positions us better to move through these phases if we can continue to be responsible in holding to CDC guidelines of social distancing and beyond. We have Texas in a good position. And I guess because the governor has simply shown steady statesman-like leadership and hasn't gotten upset and spun out on TV in his press conferences like some other governors have, we're not getting the acknowledgement for the success of flattening the curve in Texas.
Speaker, talk to the, yesterday I know there was a protest outside the Capitol, not as big as we saw in Michigan, obviously, but there was some protest outside the Capitol. There have been people here in Lubbock, and I'm sure this is happening all over the state, folks who are ready for businesses to reopen. They're forming protest. They're unhappy. Speak to those folks and what they need to know.
Well, I think they need to understand that, there is not a person in office in Texas who doesn't want Texas businesses back open. And the reality of it is, look at what we've been given from the White House, from the president, from the CDC. We have to use caution and intelligence and science in managing these. And quite candidly, and I mean, no disrespect to those folks, it's sort of the difference between being responsible and not being responsible in a situation like this. Those folks have a right to their opinion. They have a right to their protest, but they also aren't going to be held accountable for Texans getting sick and for Texans dying. Governor Abbott will be, and I think Governor Abbott's done a great job leading. And so the truth of it is, I would ask them to be patient and be respectful of the fact that this is not a situation that anybody has gone asking to have happen, and that with the information and the science, people are doing the best they can. I think the president did a great job. He was asked that question yesterday in his press conference, and he said, I think these folks are the kind of people that respect me and will listen to me, and I would beg them to hear what the president said and continue to respect him and listen to what the president's telling you.
I want to ask you, as we look forward into the next session, people are already talking about what that may or may not look like. Your predecessor, former Speaker Joe Straus, wrote a piece for the Dallas Morning News in which he said that with state revenues plummeting, our health and education systems under tremendous strain, the old way of doing things in Texas will not be sufficient. We need new approaches and new thinking as we work to turn the page on this pandemic. Policymakers need to approach the future with open minds and open dialogue. He said they must not allow politics as usual to set strict boundaries on what can even be debated and considered. What do you think he means by that? Is he talking about taxes are going to be on the table? What do you take away from that? What would your advice be?
I wouldn't dare try to speak for Joe Straus. I don't know if he was so exhausted from being speaker that he skipped last session and didn't see the incredibly collaborative effort that for the first time in over a decade, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker worked in great concert to much of the press's frustration that we weren't attacking each other. We were working together and we delivered some of the most exceptional results that have been delivered in a legislative session in a very, very long time. So I think last session, the legislature proved that we know exactly how to work together, set aside differences, and come to results and success. We passed a school finance plan without a judicial order, and it was a robust, significant plan that supports our school kids of Texas in a way that hasn't been done in decades. And there are many other successes that were accomplished. So I think we need to follow the pattern of what we accomplished and how we conducted ourselves last session. The reality of it is we will continue to have leaders leading as we see with the governor and others. And the truth of it is, next session, we are going to be in a different situation. Of course, I'm not going to be there, but the reality of it is members are going to have to continue to follow the pattern of last session, where we work together, we respect each other's ideas. Every single member of the House is allowed to bring their ideas forward and be treated with respect in doing so. And if that continues to occur, Texas will be in good shape, and we will be very successful in recovering from the pandemic.
If the social distancing guidelines are still in place in the upcoming session, how does that impact things?
Well, it certainly would have an impact, but I'll be very candid. There are, I believe, some members quietly having discussions talking about that, but we're sitting here in the middle of April, and I am most focused and most concerned about how we get Texas's businesses back to work. The reality of it is, thinking about how a legislative session runs in January, there's ample time to figure that out. The most pressing and important issue that I would impress on every leader in Texas to be concerned about is how do we get our families back out of their homes? How do we get them back to work? How do we get kids back to school? Those issues are today's issues. Those are the issues that have to be addressed, and we have to get through this pandemic sooner rather than later. And quite frankly, if we have that success, the issues of social distancing may not be there for us next session. Defeating COVID-19 is the greatest solution to all of those challenges, and we have ample time to focus on that right now. Certainly we need to consider how session would operate if we found ourselves in those situations, but my goal is for us to not be in that situation. My goal is for Texas businesses to be back to work sooner than later, and that Texas is thriving as its economy by next January. And if we see months before that, that's not occurring, and that we are going to have to worry about social distancing and these other requirements, we will make a plan, and we will be ready to serve Texas.
Before I let you go, final question, Speaker Dennis Bonnen, today from the governor during his press conference, do you believe we will hear a roadmap to getting Texas reopened, or do you think we'll hear a firm date as to when we're going to start to reopen?
It's a great question. I think you're going to see more of a roadmap. And the reality of it is unfair to expect the governor to give a firm date, because that would be irresponsible of the governor to give a firm date of Texas opens this day, because we don't know the future. We don't know whether we're going to have a spike in cases or not. We don't know if Texans are going to continue to do the exceptional job they have been doing of heeding CDC guidelines and doing the things that we have to do to defeat COVID-19. So there's not a reasonable expectation for someone to set a date certain. That is not something that could be expected at this time. But I think a clear map to how success is, which I think, frankly, the White House gave us a good map yesterday evening. But I believe you will hear from the governor today. I'm driving to Austin to be with him now at that press conference. I believe you will hear from the governor some specific concepts and strategies on how we are going to be working and already are working to get Texas back open for business.
All right, Texas House Speaker Dennis Bonnen, appreciate your time. Let's visit again soon about this roadmap and how we get Texas reopened.
Thank you, Chad. Be safe and have a good weekend.
You too. That's Texas House Speaker Dennis Bonnen here on the Chad Hasty Show.